Hey, so I just came across the episode that talked about dual enrollment. And when I started listening, I had no idea what dual enrollment was. But by the time I finished, I came to realize that this is exactly what I had done 20 years ago. So I've been out of high school for 20 years now. And way back then, I had decided that I wanted to go to community college for my last year of high school. And I even think I went the summer before that. But I just like to report back to you right now from the perspective of somebody who has done this and how it has impacted my life. So let me just take you back in time and frame this for you. So, to give you a little bit of perspective of what I was thinking of, and also some of the mistakes that I think that I made along the way in terms of choosing this path. So, my father came here to this country in 1964. And at the time, he was the only member of his family to even attend college. He graduated with a degree in engineering. And, in the 60s, that was the career path. In fact, he is still working for the same company that he was hired for. I think he's had like a 40-year anniversary with that company. Now, my mom went to school actually when I was, I think, like 14 years old. So she was actually the person who introduced me to the concept of community college. And even though I didn't know what it was at the time, the concept of dual enrollment, I started investigating and realized that, hey, you know what? I can actually go and start taking some courses here at the community college. And it was dirt cheap. I don't remember what the actual cost was per course, but I think it was something like $50 or $60 for a 3 credit course that would transfer anywhere that I wanted to transfer it to. So first, I want to just let's go back in time and imagine you are 16 years old and you're thinking about the future of your life. Well, at the time, all of my guidance counselors and teachers and my folks, they were focused on building skills. And the question they would always ask is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think that's a good question. But as I raise my child now, and we have another kid on the way here that's due in just a couple months, I don't want them to think about what they're going to be when they grow up. I want them to think about what they want to be really good at helping people with when they grow up. So, for example, way back in the 60s, they were coupled together. What you wanted to be when you grew up and what you wanted to be good at. If you were an engineer, you wanted to be good at helping people with their engineering related projects. They were coupled, they were tied together, and you could stay at the same company forever, like the example of with my father. But if we go back even to 2008, if you had the mindset of, I am a banker, I want to be a banker when I grow up, versus saying, I want to be really good at helping people manage their money, manage and grow their money. Those are two completely different mindsets. And so the mindset that I want my kids to grow up with nowadays is, what do I want to be really good at helping people to achieve when I grow up, right? And I think even from the perspective of when they grow up, they can actually start doing this very soon. I mean, I have a 3-year-old and we're already talking about the concept of money. We're already talking about the concept of value. And toward that end, let's talk about now what the value was for me in terms of doing this dual enrollment in high school. So I was a runner in high school, and so I ran cross country. And in the fall, one of the challenges that I had was I wanted to continue running my senior year. And as luck would have it, one of the challenges that I faced in terms of the legal requirements was I needed to take a physical education class in order to fulfill the requirements for graduation. And so for that first term, I actually returned back to school and participated in gym class and ran cross country, and that fulfilled that requirement. The next term in the spring, I actually realized that I could take a strength training and conditioning course at the community college, and it fulfilled that requirement. So I didn't step foot back in my high school until I actually graduated. So that was really kind of an interesting transition. And what it did for me is, if you're familiar with anyone who has flipped a house or a piece of real estate before, if they have to borrow money from the bank, then as soon as they close on that house, they have expenses that are starting to accrue. So the faster they can flip that house and the faster they can sell that house, do whatever renovations they have to do, and then sell that house, the better off they are, the more profit that they'll make. Well, imagine how that would be different if instead of having a note on the house, they just owned it outright. And so that stops or really slows down the clock in terms of those monthly payments that they have to be making. And from my perspective, that's exactly what doing the dual enrollment option did for me. It absolutely slowed down the clock in terms of, number one, the total cost of my education, but number two, in terms of what it allowed me to explore on the side. And here's what I mean by that. So I finished high school. I had, I think, maybe 30 or so college credits. And then I actually went over the summer. So maybe I went in somewhere between a freshman and a sophomore into college. And I decided I wanted to go to an out-of-state school, which was, of course, was going to be really expensive. And so I went to that out-of-state school. I spent a semester there, realized that what I was getting was not very much different from what I was getting at the community college, except I was paying orders of magnitude more for it. So then I transferred to the state university in the state where I was a resident, and my whole education, including graduate school, cost less than one semester at the out-of-state school. So I was able to incur no debt. I was able to have a huge amount of latitude in terms of exploring courses that were interesting to me. But the most important thing to me was that I was able to do work on the side. And at the time, I started a small business where I sold a specific type of sporting equipment online. And this was in the late 90s, so there was no competition at all. And I was able to pay my way through school and get some really valuable skills doing that. Now here, I want to talk to you about, and that was some of the good things that doing the dual enrollment option enabled me to do. But here's where I made a mistake, and I want to share this with you because I think it's so important. It was important then 20 years ago. I think it's even more important now. I studied science, and science, and especially my dad being an engineer, we were really focused on skills. We were really focused on education and skill acquisition as a path to success. And I think that's true, but I think there's a ceiling on it. It's the development of skills are necessary, but not sufficient. I think more so today than way back then. And here's what I mean by that. So a lot of people will get a undergraduate degree, and then what'll they do? They'll say, well, I really think I should get a master's degree in whatever this is, rather than taking the skills that they already have, taking them out into the marketplace and seeing how people will be willing to exchange money for whatever service it is that you can provide for them. I think that that's a huge decoupling that has happened in terms of the education system is not matched up with what people actually want to provide for a skill. So people go to college because they want to get a skill. And I think that's kind of, in some ways, based on my experience, has not really provided me with what it was that I needed, because where I got the skill was actually in the marketplace. Where I got the skill was actually in either finding a coach or a mentor and then going and developing that skill and then selling a product or service based on that skill, getting feedback from the marketplace and improving like that. Because what happens is once you develop the skill, unless you have also developed the ability to communicate, the ability to negotiate, the ability to persuade, then you're still kind of a commodity. And in today's global marketplace, we know what happens to commodities. It's a race for the bottom. So that is where I definitely did not use university correctly, because I was focused on university for skill development. But I think that really the most valuable part of university is utilizing it for building a network of people who you will add value to over the course of your career and who will consequently then add value back to you. One of the biggest challenges that I faced after I had graduated was I had focused almost solely on skill development, and I had ignored the value of the network. So when I was, let me give you an example of how this impacted me. So from that web business, I transitioned to my master's work. Now, my master's work was focused on fire science. Crazy, right? Because I had gone to school for engineering and geology before that. Now, the reason I was able to transition to fire science was because I had so much latitude. I wasn't in a rush to get anything done. I had money coming in on the side. And so when I started my fire science degree, and this was wildland fire, so forest fires and such, I had no fire experience. So because I had this time, this latitude, and this extra money, I was actually able to leverage that time and that extra money. And I went through a couple of fire academies, right? So this is in the early 2000s. And here I am, I'm enrolled in this master's program. I'm learning how the science of fighting wildland fires and detecting wildland fires. That's what I studied, actually, was using satellites to detect the start and progression of wildland fires. And so as a result of that, I started another small business that was focused on deploying that technology in the field, because at the time it needed to be done in a lab. And so I was focused on deploying it actually in the field. And so by the time I graduated with my graduate degree in 2004, I had actually built a business that was focused on doing just that, using satellites to detect where various things were on the ground. And it was a very non-linear path to there, because I was able to do this sort of sampling of where education, the building of, so this is another aside. Being good at school is different from being good at learning. Being good at school, being good at having someone talk at you and then regurgitate that information to pass a test is very different from being able to synthesize that information and, where it's applied to the marketplace, actually go out there and apply what you've learned in a way that provides value to someone else, such that they are willing to exchange their money for it, right? So going back to this business where I had created this business where I would use the technology to detect fire starts and fire progression. Well, what happened in 2005 was it was a kind of an asbestos year for fires. Nothing caught on fire of any consequence, but the whole Gulf Coast was submerged with Hurricane Katrina. And so I got the opportunity to be one of the first responders on the ground in Hurricane Katrina. And I was attached to urban search and rescue task forces. And that was just an amazing experience that never would have happened if I had just taken the normal progression out of high school and just became an engineer or an environmental scientist or whatever it was that I wanted to be, and just started doing, that progression. I was always able to pivot, and as I've now come to learn, able to really take a skill and I call it skill arbitrage. Find a skill that is relatively common and not valuable in one area, and take it to another area where it is extremely valuable. So, for instance, the wildland fire mapping stuff, not particularly valuable in a sort of engineering environment, a day-to-day engineering environment, immensely valuable in a search and rescue environment or in a emergency environment. And that was really interesting. From there, based on that work, I was offered to go out and work for the Army in Hawaii. From there, I was actually recruited to work for Department of Homeland Security in Washington, D.C. And these are things that never would have happened if I had just taken the linear path of go to school, work for somebody else, and hope to do a good job so that they give you a promotion or something like that. I basically, just made myself valuable to people who I wanted to provide that value for. And it's enabled me to pivot in a variety of ways throughout the past 20 years in a way that if I had just kept one path, would not really have enabled me to do. So That's my experience with it. I would say that if you are somebody who is going out there and you're focused on just wanting to be a lawyer or just wanting to be a doctor, and that's still a paradigm that works for you, then maybe this is not the way to do it unless you're somebody who's like, I want to graduate so I can start doing that. If you want to graduate quickly, then I would say skip high school entirely and start taking community college courses as early as you can. But if you're somebody who has ideas and if you're somebody who really is focused on finding what it is that, not that you want to be when you grow up, but that you want to be really good at helping other people with and that you want to be really good at providing value to the world with, it's a great opportunity to go out there and really engage in a way that you're getting the traditional education on one hand, but you're also able to apply it in a way that is tested by the market on the other hand. So if you have any questions about this, if you'd like to chat about something, I may not be the best resource in the world for you based on your particular, experience, but it's something that I think my life would totally not be the same if I hadn't done this. I mean, I'll just give you a for instance. I became licensed to fly an airplane when I worked at Homeland Security. I've traveled around the world as a result of DHS. And here's the thing. They brought me on as a branch chief, which in the structure of how that works is actually a fairly high position to be brought on. There are people who work their whole career who have master's degrees to get to that position where I was at 29, I think I was. So taking the shortcuts, not by shortcutting the effort, but by shortcutting the process because you're bringing so much value to the table, I think is something that this is potentially really good at. So if you have any questions, let me know. And I hope that this helps you out in some way or other. Thanks again. Bye.